Hey, Know I listeners, I want to ask a question. Do you think it's okay to be mediocre? You may know where I'm going with this if you're not very online. First of all, good for you. And second, you may not know where I'm going with this. But in the last week of our summer series, which have been quick questions where I just kind of address something that's in the news and look at the why behind that issue, I want to look at a commentary that has been causing a lot of buzz in the Wall Street Journal, or at least it was published in the Wall Street Journal, and it has been causing a lot of buzz in a lot of other news publications ever since. And that is this article by 22-year-old Emil Barr, "Work-Life Balance Will Keep You Mediocre." Now, you may have heard of this article. You may have your own take on it. I'm going to quickly talk about what was in the article and then kind of address the why. Look at some of the assumptions that are underlying a few of the things that the author has claimed here in his column, and then discuss whether or not those assumptions are true, and is it okay to live your life differently, or does he have a few valid points, especially for members of Gen Z? So let's get into it. But before I dive in, I want to just let you know that next week, in the first week of September, we will be launching our next series. So if you're new to Know Why Podcast, what I typically do is I'll have a series that's going on, sometimes for several weeks at a time, that really allows us to dive deep into an issue. And this is where I typically feature interviews with subject matter experts, and we really cover a topic in depth. So the last series I did was the Know About AI series, which had so many good interviews, so much good insight from our Know Why Podcast guests. Then before that, at the beginning of the year, I did the Know Why God is Good series, which was really good. Summer was kind of our little break, and we're going to be launching into a series that's focused on the family. So for young adults, if you are interested in marriage, if you're interested in dating, in the fertility crisis, what it means to build a healthy family in 2025, how you can practically do that. If you're single, if you don't have kids, if you can't have kids, what does family mean for you? I want to cover all of those things and really help us know why we believe what we believe about family formation specifically, because no matter where you are in all of those examples I just mentioned, we know that the family is foundational for any society. So the health of the family kind of determines the health of the culture, but there are a lot of ways to contribute to the family and to understand what that means and how that impacts us as individuals. Already have started interviewing some people for that and working on some of those episodes, so I'm really excited to launch that. But before that, let's talk about if it's okay to be mediocre. So again, this was published last week in the Wall Street Journal by Emil Barr, who is a very successful Gen Z. He's only 22 years old. Here's like the intro to his article. "I'm 22 and I've built 2 companies that together are valued at more than 20 million. So his company, or at least one of the ones that he writes a lot about in this, is called Step Up Social. He helps companies grow on TikTok and on Instagram Reels. He signed his own alma mater, which is Stanford, as a client. So anyways, he's clearly very, very successful. One of those typical, that you might consider the 30 under 30, the people that everybody's, focused on, because people are always obsessed when somebody is very successful when they're very young. And this guy is saying, basically, this article is, here is how I've done that. And in short, it's completely eliminating work-life balance. He said, "What if I told you that the notion of work-life balance is keeping a generation from reshaping the global economy?" I'll link the article so you can read it for yourself, but let's go through a few of his claims, or at least his explanations for how he became so successful at such a young age. He talks about, again, building 2 companies valued at more than 20 million. His goal, by the way, is to be a billionaire by the time he's 30. More on that in a minute. He says, "When people ask how I do it, the answer isn't what they expect or want to hear. I eliminated work-life balance entirely and just worked. When you front-load success early, you buy the luxury of choice for the rest of your life." So really what he's arguing is that he has subjected himself to a very extreme schedule in order to build success early in life so that he can have more freedom later on. So rather than focusing on work-life balance at this point in his life while he's young, then he is just grinding all the time. Really more than that. So here's what he talks about. In his first year working at Step Up Social, which is one of the companies that he founded, he says, I averaged 3.5 hours of sleep a night and had about 12.5 hours every day to focus on business. The physical, and he was in college, by the way, while this was happening. The physical and mental toll was brutal. I gained 80 pounds, lived on Red Bull, and struggled with anxiety. But this level of intensity was the only way to build a multi-million-dollar company. And he goes on to say, we understand that the window for building something meaningful is narrow, and the tools to do it are often already in our hands. So in other words, he's looking at this as, I have a really narrow scope of time in order to just completely devote myself to building something that is meaningful, air quotes, because that's what he said, and something that's valuable, something that he believes will give him financial freedom later on for certain purposes, which I'll explain according to what he said in the article. And so he just was really sacrificing everything else to focus on business during this time. And again, he's only 22 years old. So here are some of the details of what he did. Prune social networks. I filtered every social commitment through 3 questions. Would I rather be building my company or spending time on this? Will this relationship survive if I skip this event? And if not, is this someone I really need in my life? He said the isolation was painful and some friendships didn't survive. Another thing he said was optimize academic life. Now, I think that's a little bit misleading because he wasn't actually optimizing his academic life. He was just really approaching it, his college education, in a very utilitarian manner. So he said, I treated college like a business decision. I gave priority to classes graded purely on exams rather than attendance, and did my best to attend only if the subject matter was related to my business ventures or interests. So he's admitting up front that he was not focused on attending classes unless it directly impacted his grade, or he tried not to even take classes that required attendance, and he only attended if it was something that was of interest to him and his business. And he steered clear of courses that banned laptops in the classroom because I couldn't be offline for 3 or more hours a day when my team and clients needed me. That's his quote. And then he adds, plus it isn't 1999 and that kind of thinking won't get us anywhere. I'll come back to that. So he says, for as far as his social life, every commitment had to justify its place on my calendar, with social events, casual hangouts, and even family gatherings weighed against business priorities. So that was the plumb line. That was the standard, working on his business, and he's admitting this outright. Now he says, I'm not suggesting everyone eliminate work-life balance, but rather arguing that for ambitious young people who want to build wealth, traditional balance is a trap that will keep you comfortably mediocre. The path I chose was painful. There's no sugarcoating the mental health struggles, the physical deterioration, or the social isolation that came with this intensity. But in a winner-takes-all economy, extreme efficiency during your peak physical and mental years becomes a baseline for building wealth that lasts a lifetime. And he goes on to explain why he had this goal. I plan to become a billionaire by age 30. Then I will have the time and resources to tackle problems close to my heart like climate change, species extinction, and economic inequality. The formula is simple. Sacrifices I make now are an investment in decades of choice later. All right, so that's Emil Barr, clearly very successful young man, and he, after publishing this, has been featured and interviewed and talked about in all these different news publications, making a big buzz online because he's saying some very, stark things. And he's admitting that this is different, but this is what we need to build success. And he says we shouldn't be mediocre. So I want to address a few things here. I think that there's a little bit of truth in what he says, but I think that he says some things that are problematic too. And I want to talk about this because for some of us, it may seem obvious, okay, that's a little extreme. That's kind of silly. But I remember being a young person, being a teenager in college, even, shortly after college, and and feeling like I was wasting my life if I wasn't multitasking or like pushing myself to the max every minute of the day. And I do think there's a little bit of something to be said for taking advantage of a lot of the freedom that comes with youth, because even when I think of my life now and I'm, busier with work, I'm more kind of settled into my career, and I've got kids and, family life and a little bit more rootedness, which are all wonderful things, but I don't have quite as much free time as I did 10 years ago or 11 years ago when it seemed so busy then. But really, in retrospect, I realized I did have a lot of free time. At the same time, though, I've gained a lot of wisdom and actually become a lot better at managing my time. So practically speaking, I'm still accomplishing more now than I did then. But at the time, I just felt this impending sense of like, if I don't get it done now, I'll never get it done. And I think sometimes a lot of intelligent, high achieving young people, or people that maybe were told that, like, you're gifted, you're talented, you're in these advanced school programs, you're going to go far, you're going to, do things, that can actually put a lot of pressure on somebody. And then if they are in their early 20s, and they're 22, and they're like, I haven't built 2 multi-million businesses yet, what am I doing with my life? Like, that kind of anxiety can be very real. Or I interviewed on the No I podcast somebody that I knew from my alma mater last year. And she was talking about the fact that, when she came to that college, and again, it was a bunch of high achievers, there were students who coming in had already published books, and that's one of her goals. And one of mine too. And we were just kind of laughing about that, and how she was like, every year that she hadn't published a book, she used to feel bad and guilty about it, and just how wrong that thinking really is. And so anyway, that was a good conversation. I'll link it below. But I don't want to just take for granted the fact that people who read his thing will automatically be like, oh yeah, that's, kind of extreme, because you may be in a season of life where you're feeling like maybe I am focusing too much on balance. Maybe I'm being lazy. Maybe I'm not pushing myself as hard as I should push myself. And I want to try to offer some perspective. So that's what I'm going to try to do. You can agree or disagree. As always, I welcome comments and emails and whatever, because I would love to hear from listeners more. But I want to try to offer a little bit of perspective on this. So first, let me start with affirming or just acknowledging some of the things he said, okay? He didn't say that everybody has to do this. He literally said it's not for everyone. And so I want to go back to a couple of episodes ago when I was talking about calling, and I was reviewing the book You Have a Calling, which was so good, and I still recommend it. But, maybe somebody's calling is to be more ambitious. There are some people who are they thrive on a little bit more achievement. They have a higher capacity for just being more productive and doing more. Maybe they don't need as much sleep. Maybe they do have big goals and ambitions in terms of building businesses or really achieving something that takes a lot of work up front. Even going into certain professions like law or the medical field, like that does take somebody who's an ambitious person to say, I know that during the front of this, I'm dedicating a lot of time to working and studying and building up so that I can do this later on. That's not a bad thing. It's not for everybody, but if that is somebody's particular calling and they really feel like they need to put in a lot of sacrifice right now for a goal later on, that in itself isn't a bad thing. Okay. I still believe that what he talks about is a little too extreme, even for those very ambitious people, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. It is okay to know that something's going to take sacrifice in the short term to get to a long-term goal. That's true of anything. It's true of trying to get in shape, and like, we're going to have to go to the gym, and it's not going to be fun at first, and you're going to have to build up, and it's going to hurt, but at the end of the day, you're going to be stronger and healthier. You're going to have to really study to try to learn this new thing. You're going to have to stretch your mind, and that's a short-term sacrifice for something long-term. Or maybe you have financial goals. You're trying to pay off debt. You're trying to save up to buy something, and it's like, oh, I can't go out to eat. I can't, do these certain things. I'm going to have to really live on a very tight budget, or, in today's economy, maybe even more extreme things. Like, I'd really like to get my own place, but I am going to work as much as I can and continue living with family or roommates or whatever for this amount of time until I can get out on my own, because that's just what I have to do. So again, short-term sacrifice for long-term goals. Nothing wrong with that. So my concern that this kind of arrangement or level of sacrifice that he's talking about, even for ambitious people, it really takes a lot of things that are essential for us as human beings. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're like, a low ambition person, meaning like, I just want to have a job that pays my bills and like hang out with friends, or like, I want to build all these businesses. You still have certain human needs that need to be fulfilled that are more important than material success across the board. And that's just true because of who we are as human beings, and as a Christian, because of who God is and why he created us in the first place. Okay, that's what I believe. So he is treating a lot of these other things like family and friends and relationship and that balance as like just options that, some people choose those, but they're not for me, or they're not for right now. And I think that that's false, because it completely overlooks something that's actually a need for us. And he talks about the mental health toll and the anxiety and the health, and it like, that's not okay. If you are in a season where maybe you're pursuing another degree or something, are you going to have some late nights? Or when you become a new parent, are you going to have to deal with crying babies in the night for a season? Yes, but ideally you have a support system that still helps and allows you to catch up on rest sometimes. And that's not meant to be forever. Like, sacrificing our health mentally or physically and knowing that we're doing so to such an extreme level, like, we shouldn't really be doing that no matter what our goal is in life. And if that is happening, then we need to seek help. Not just be like, oh yeah, this is, I know that I'm, super anxious, but it's worth it. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's appropriate, but that's just me. And again, it's because, if you want to ask for the why, it's because of who we were created by and why we were created as human beings. Okay. So again, let's talk about like, if you are or have been or know that young person who does feel driven, but maybe they struggle with feeling that pressure, like they're not doing enough. And now this is making the headlines, and it's like, oh, I am a mediocre person and that's bad. Let's remind ourselves of some truths. An activity doesn't have to move the needle on long-term goals to be worthwhile. And that was one of his phrases. For instance, the things that other college students were spending time on, like socializing, entertainment, even going out on dates, hanging out with friends. He said those are activities that rarely move the needle on long-term goals. But an activity doesn't have to move the needle. You don't always have to be viewing life in terms of only if it gets me to here. That is a totally ends-focused life. And it's whatever means gets me to that end. That is what makes life worth it. But what about the here and now? We have to enjoy the here and now, because realistically, that's all we're guaranteed. Now, there's, again, a balance here. And yes, there is a balance, because if we want to look at ancient wisdom, the Bible talks about storing up for yourself. Like it says, look to the ants. They store up food for themselves to have during the winter. But the Bible also says not to worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow isn't even guaranteed. And if we're worrying about tomorrow, that doesn't make our life any longer or shorter. So there's this kind of paradox of like, we do need to prepare for the future and be wise, but realize that we don't know what the future holds, so we're not even putting all of our eggs in that basket. There's enough to focus on right here. And if we believe that we have a God who created the world not only for us to take care of, but also to enjoy, then you don't have to be moving the needle any which way to sit down and enjoy the sunset. If we believe that we were created for the purpose of relationship with other people, then It's okay if you are spontaneously, you arrange your life in such a way that you have room and time to spontaneously hang out with a friend or to accept that phone call from your grandma and not be like, this isn't going to, align with my business goals today, so I'm going to have to push that to the side. And we also need to think about, and again, this is for people who really believe in something beyond this life, and I encourage you to do that. Sometimes we need to think with an eternal perspective. And this is hard because I don't have goals to build a multi-million-dollar business. Okay. Like that's not something that's on my bucket list. I'm going to be totally fine if I'm not a millionaire at the end of my life. So I still, though, struggle with just the day-to-day of like, I've got to get my to-do list done for today. I have these things I need to do as a mom. I have these things that I need to do that are on my, work agenda. And I've got my planner every day with like tasks because it's the only way I can remember them. And then sometimes you do get that phone call or you do have that opportunity that comes up to maybe spend time with somebody or have a conversation, or somebody will come to mind that I haven't talked to in a while. And I kind of get this impression that maybe I should text them and reach out. And then the busy side of my brain goes, but if you reach out, then they're going to respond. And then you're going to have to respond. And then you're going to have a conversation. And honestly, that's just kind of a sad way to think about it because maybe they're coming to mind because they need somebody to reach out to them. And maybe the time that I take to answer my kid's 20th question about God that day, or answer the phone call from somebody I haven't talked to in a while, or listen to that prompting in my spirit to reach out and text somebody I haven't talked to in a while. Maybe that doesn't move the needle for my long-term goals here on earth, but it does move the needle in eternity. Maybe that's going to have a bigger impact on that person than I could even imagine or understand, and it's not my job to know it all, but that is part of my function, and it's like a primary function as a human being on this earth is to love other people well. And so people should always take priority over anything else that we're doing. That doesn't mean we can't have boundaries. Maybe we can talk about that in the family series. But people should always be prioritized. It was funny. This is a little bit of a side note, but a couple weeks ago, I did the book review on You Have a Calling, the book, which is so good. Yesterday, I was in church and we had a guest speaker who talked about how everybody has a purpose. And it was just so beautiful how sometimes God hits us with the same theme multiple times within a short span of time. And you're like, I think this is something that God is telling me to focus on. But one of the things that the pastor was saying is that we all have a purpose. We all have a stage, so to speak. Our paths are going to look different, but we all have a God-given purpose. And whatever that path is for us, whatever that purpose is, it might not look like somebody else's, but it is going to involve people and serving others and doing something to help others, because our gifts are not for ourselves. Something else he said was that, we are all given gifts. And so, for instance, maybe ambition or a really, sharp business sense, the goal to create a lot of businesses or to use one's wealth for good purposes, like that can be a purpose in life and a calling in life. But if we're using them for ourselves, if we're doing it on our own strength, then we're going to hit our max, we're going to hit our capacity, and we really need to be walking with the Lord while we do that. So that means that we're not focusing on ourselves, we're thinking, how can I use this gift for somebody else? And so again, looking at this young man who I think does have good intentions, because he said he wants to be a billionaire by 30 so he can do all these great things in the world, like address climate change and income inequality and all of that. So theoretically, that's like, okay, you want to help people, and that way you want to create a better world for the future. But it's a very ends-focused worldview. It's the ends justifies the means. So if you hurt, ignore a bunch of people in the process to get there, or really damage yourself, and you just so that you can help people someday, what if you don't get a someday? So that's just the reality that we have to think about, is that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. And so if we're doing something that is causing us to treat people poorly in the now, I think we're missing the whole point. Because if there's somebody in front of you right now that needs well, then that means we have to, that's our purpose. That's part of our purpose right now. If there's somebody in front of us right now, then we need to treat them well. We can't just say, oh, they're part of the sacrifice and I'll treat people later down the road once I accomplish my goals. No, we're missing the point. Life doesn't work that way. All right. So another thing, it's okay to not always be multitasking. So this is, again, something that I think we struggle with, even when like we are working. Sometimes it can be hard to just like rest. And even if you're sitting down, like I'm going to, watch a movie or watch a show, it's like, well, let me get my laptop and be working on some stuff. Sometimes you need to do that. But sometimes you really just need to focus on the moment, because people think that they're multitasking a lot, but really it's impossible to multitask. And there's like brain science on this, but what you're actually doing is you're keeping your mind from fully focusing. And so you're thinking, oh, I'm multitasking. But what you're actually doing is you're bouncing in your brain from one thing to another, from one focus to another. But to really like absorb information, your brain has to stay focused on one thing for a certain amount of time. It's like for several minutes. Sometimes we will like bounce our brain to something else before we even get completely absorbed in the original task. And so are you really being that productive? For instance, if he's sitting through a 3-hour class, or you're sitting through a 3-hour college class, and maybe you're like, well, I should have my email. I should be answering emails. Okay, you answered some emails. What's going to be made or broken in the 3 hours that you're focused on your class? Maybe you actually retain that information more. And it's not just a grade that you can get to check it off and be like, I got this degree and that's going to help me with my business. But you're actually allowing your brain to grow and to form. So something that I would also say, so if you are listening to this and you're younger, or maybe you know people in college or heading off to college, I really sometimes wish that if I was going to go back in time, I could just make myself slow down and soak everything in more. Because right now I realize how lucky I was to be able to attend college, which it wasn't easy, but I don't know if it would even be possible now with that, just the different economy and everything. But I was such a gift, and I don't think took advantage of the opportunity to just focus on learning that I had. And there are so many things that I kind of remember that I'm like going back and I'm rereading books that I read and studied in college because I want to actually absorb the information now. And I'm doing that now that I'm like older and have a lot more things going on. And I'm just like, if I had just known and really taken advantage of the opportunity to just focus on learning and studying, then I think I really would have benefited even more. So if you're lucky enough to be there and you're attending a quality school or you're attending any sort of educational program, pay attention in class. Don't just look at it as a check mark for a grade or thinking like, this is such a waste of time. I could be like answering emails right now. I'm building my business. No. Sit there and soak that in. Focus on the opportunity to learn. Allow your brain to get fully focused and actually absorb the information. And if you don't, then I really think you'll regret it someday. And, put away the devices, put away the laptop. That's why there's a movement right now to actually go analog in classrooms again. He said it's 1999, that thinking of like, we can't have a laptop in class isn't going to get us anywhere. Well, if you're not actually learning anything in class because you're so distracted by all these devices, that's what's not going to get you anywhere. So here's something that I wanted to quote, okay? So a common saying among Navy SEALs is slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So this can, I think, apply to so many things, including just like little daily tasks. Like if you're in a hurry, and again, as a mom, as just a person who tends to be in a hurry, I'm like, oh my God, like do this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I'm rushing around and really not saving any time, because when you're rushing, you're more likely to make a mistake. You're going to get clumsy. And so you want to go slow so that you can go smooth. And when things are going smoothly, you actually accomplish things more quickly. It's kind of the same principle as slow and steady wins the race, right? We all remember the fable of the hare and the tortoise, and you are hopping around thinking you're going so fast, and then you get distracted. Slow and steady wins the race. I think this is true in bigger things in life also. So even when you're in a class, it's like, okay, I could be responding to messages. I could be, checking such and such data. I could be analyzing this and like, oh, yeah, there, I'm going to take a little note real quick. Or You could just be focusing on one thing, really learn it and absorb it, and it's gonna serve you better, like for the test down the line and in the long term, that information. And that is gonna produce just a smoother life outcome, focusing on one thing at a time. It's an illusion to think that you're actually moving faster through life by multitasking all the time. That's what I think, and I think there's a lot of information to back me up on that. And so another thing he said that is kind of true is like focus on quality relationships. So if you do have a big goal, something that you really feel like you're called to, and it's an ambition of yours and it's a healthy one, and people don't support that, or they're constantly like being negative and discouraging you, well, without knowing full context, I'm not just going to wholesale recommend to cut people off, but it is okay to focus on relationships that are also life-giving, and to prioritize close relationships. I don't necessarily think that you have to have a wide social circle to be fulfilled. Sometimes having a few really quality friendships and relationships is actually more satisfying than having a broad circle of surface level relationships. So, that's okay. Like, you don't, when he's talking about like not going to every single social event, that's okay. You don't have to do every single thing, but it's also true that not all relationships are productive, so to speak, and relationships aren't all about you. So again, it's that thing that we've talked about so much recently of just kind of reframing the way we think to realize that as human beings, we are made to be relational, but we are also made to be needed. And that means that our relationships need to be sacrificial if they're worth anything. And if we believe that human beings are that valuable and that we are eternal souls and that part of our purpose, no matter what the details are, it's going to be to serve other people, then yeah, you're going to have relationships that aren't always productive. And that goes back to like taking the phone call or spending time with somebody, even if they're not like a business partner or that hangout isn't going to advance your business goals, then it's okay to just hang out with them because they're a person or they're a friend. Or, sometimes relationships require maintenance. Sometimes people are going through a season where you're going to have to give more, and sometimes they're going to have to give more. And so, like, again, that balance of you don't have to have, maintain a bunch of shallow connections, but sometimes relationships require maintenance, and sometimes it doesn't seem productive in the material sense. And like, that's okay. That's not the point of everything. So here's another big thing. He is really banking on being successful. Clearly, he already is successful. He had an idea and he succeeded at it. It sold. But you know how many people sacrifice a ton to work on a business idea and it doesn't succeed, or they try and try and try again and they don't succeed until they're middle-aged. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't go for it, but sometimes it takes years and years. In fact, that is more common. And most people, if they completely burn themselves out on the first try, they're not even going to have anything left to give to the second, third, fourth, fifth, 50th try that actually becomes successful, and they're going to like really miss out on everything that makes life worth living in the meantime because they've burnt themselves out so much on something that didn't even succeed. So maybe that sounds harsh, but most people, even if they run themselves ragged, don't build two multi-million-dollar businesses by the time they're 22. And that's okay. Like, it's okay that he did that, but we don't look at his life as a formula because it might not work out. And that's okay. Also, you never know what's going to happen. There could be another recession, another Great Depression, another world war. Like, there's just so much up in the air in life, which is why we don't bank everything on the future. We don't store up all of our treasure in material things, material wealth. That's what the Bible teaches, because it can be taken away. And again, if you believe in the afterlife, you can't take all that money with you, but you know what will last? beyond your life and even into eternity, again, is the impact that you are making on other people's lives. So I'd wager that Emil's success boils down to a few things: his drive and sacrifice, of course. So kudos to him for that, but also probably some luck and good fortune as well. Because again, there's no guarantee that he would have been successful. There's no guarantee that he'll continue to be successful. Who knows what will happen? None of us know the answer to everything. And money, well, money is important. And if people have it, they should use it well. They should be good stewards of it. But it's not the end all be all to solving the world's problems. If it was, then there's already enough rich people and money in the world to have solved all the world's problems. So one more billionaire going to solve the world's problems? Maybe this is cynical of me, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Again, the people are the problem. The people are the ones that keep messing things up. The rich people and the poor people. Like, we all make mistakes, okay? We're all sinful, broken human beings that don't do things perfectly. So that's not to say, again, that you shouldn't have goals or say, I really want to be wealthy and successful and have financial freedom so that I can make a difference. Then that's a good thing. But don't sacrifice your entire ability to be healthy and make a difference in the here and now just so that, because you're thinking, well, really it's all going to be when I'm a billionaire or when I'm this age, and everything in the meantime doesn't matter. It's a very unstable way to think about things because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So another thing, this came from the sermon that I heard yesterday, which just aligns so well with a lot of what I wanted to talk about and other things that have kind of been a theme recently, at least for my life and a little bit on the No I podcast, I think, is that when you are called to something, remember, your path isn't going to look like somebody else's. So one of the things that our guest speaker in church said is that barriers to you fulfilling your calling that God has given you include comparison. And yeah, sometimes it includes comfort zone. So like, again, kudos to Mr. Barr for breaking out of his comfort zone, it sounds like. But also distractions. And so, I wonder, can you be so focused on something that you think is your calling that you get distracted from, again, the calling that's right in front of you, like maybe that relationship or that thing that doesn't actually require money to solve, but just requires you being aware and willing to make a little bit of a sacrifice from what you think is your long-term goal. So we also have to remember that we can't compare our journey to somebody else's. Maybe God does something in your life at a certain time, and for somebody else, it happens earlier or later, but you have a completely different journey to walk. And the things that are happening in your life, God can use for a purpose that is going to be seen later down the road. And so when we, again, this comes from a Christian perspective, but I think it's true, when you submit your time to God and you trust Him, saying, you know the future, I don't, so I'm going to be faithful in what you've called me to do, and not say, oh, I'll obey you later when I have $1 billion and I can be more effective, but say, I'll obey you now, then He establishes our capacity. That's a quote from what the guest speaker said yesterday, and it happens on His timing, and it happens in the way that it's supposed to happen. And it's okay if it doesn't happen as fast as we wanted it to, because it'll happen when it's supposed to happen, and it'll be a lot more beautiful than when we force it to happen in our own strength. So again, we can make short-term sacrifices for long-term goals, but we can't act like we know the future. We can't sacrifice everything good in the short term because we think we'll know what will happen long term. And some of the things we should never be willing to sacrifice are that personal connection and those healthy relationships, the appreciation for life, just the little moments, the talking with a friend who spontaneously calls you, or taking a walk and enjoying nature, putting your device away and enjoying a book, or actually sitting through a class undistracted and just focusing on what the professor is saying. Like, those are little things that part of our purpose is to actually enjoy those things. And that's okay. We don't need to have this pressure to be multitasking all the time. So, and I think I think Gen Z actually is seeing that, because there was another article that I saw this morning talking about how Gen Z is nostalgic for a time before they were even born, because they are burnt out from the constant connectivity and the pressure. And another thing, Gen Z is the most educated generation on record in terms of achieving degrees and educational success, but that can again lead to so much pressure. And I think a lot of young adults are kind of craving more of that simple life, and that's not mediocre. Maybe by the world's standards it is, but that's actually a good thing. How much better would the world be if more people were focused on doing things that are filled with joy, that bring peace, connecting with friends, not having to worry about everything going on in the world every second, but investing more in their own local community and changing things right in front of them instead of climbing the ladder? I actually think the whole world would end up being healthier. It doesn't take, like a couple of billionaires to climb to the top and change everything. If more people were just focused on living the lives in front of them in a healthy way, where they were prioritizing other people and having, yes, that good balance, then the whole world would actually be healthier. So just think about the effect of everybody living the way he lived. That actually kind of, I think, lead to a more broken world. So I really don't want to rag on Emil Barr. I think he's obviously had a lot of success, and maybe that is something that he's called to do. And yeah, we should be willing to work hard and make short-term sacrifices, but it's okay to be mediocre, as he says it. And so there's one thing, I'll end on this, because once again, as usual, I've gone longer than I intended to in this episode, but there was a response in the Wall Street Journal a few days later, and one of them is from somebody who responded. They are a little older, so this is from Arian Danian, and he says, "I admire Mr. Barr's achievements. Building a multi-million-dollar business in college takes creativity, resilience, and drive. His call for 20-somethings to work harder is a good one. But two parts of his argument deserve another look. First, while test-taking ability may peak in our 20s, judgment and emotional intelligence mature later. The stereotype of the college dropout founder is more myth than reality. For the fastest-growing U.S. startups, the average founder's age is 45. Second, the traditional path he dismisses can be quietly powerful. I've advanced in a corporate career, lived beneath my means, and invested steadily. I'm 34 and have built financial security without burning out, losing sleep, or sacrificing relationships. Efficient capital markets allow ordinary workers, not merely prodigies, to reach independence. Mr. Barr offers a model for the few who thrive on extremes. The rest of us know that wealth built on 3.5 hours of sleep a night isn't freedom, it's simply another prison." So I think that says it really well, and for now I'll leave it there. But don't forget, subscribe if you haven't, leave a rating and review. Since we are kicking off the next season next week and the next series, feel free to email me with questions that you'd like us to address, specifically with regard to family or in a future series. Until then, I'll see you next week.